Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Today, in this episode, I wanted to talk about theory and praxis in dialectical meta-realism. As you know, dialectical meta-realism is the theoretical perspective which I have developed myself, and it is based primarily on two things, which is where I get the term dialectical meta-realism from. First, the word dialectical comes from Roy Bhaskar's dialectical critical realism, which was the second turn in his critical realism. If you want a general explanation of how Roy formulated the dialectic, you can look behind me and see that chart of the dialectic, which begins with absence, goes on to absenting the absence, and then culminates with transformation. That is a brilliant way that Roy understood the dialectic and the way that he made critical realism into a literally transformative perspective, one which can transform not only you and I, but which can hopefully transform our entire planet. And if there is anything that our planet needs more right now, it is transformation. Transformation is the number one thing that we as a planet require. If we don't have it soon, I don't think anything can be certain, because right now we are at a crisis point in the world. The world exists right now at a point between its culmination and its end. In other words, there is something which has culminated, something, and I don't know what it is. But if we do not deal with that, if we do not deal with that culmination which seems to have occurred in the world as we know it, then we literally may see our end. So we need to figure out what has culminated, because we look around us and we see tremendous change. We see culmination. Culmination is all around us. Nothing today is the same as it was a few years ago. I think that is indisputable. But what will we do about it? And so far, it appears to me that we have not made the right decisions, or maybe we do not know what those decisions should be. But the culmination has occurred. That part is over. We still have a chance, however, to make the appropriate changes to ourselves and to our societies. And then hopefully our civilization, our planet will not end, whether through nuclear war or through climate change. And so that's basically transformation as I see it. We need transformation. We are a planet crying out for transformation, and a planet which so far has not seen any transformation whatsoever. We are still locked into our old patterns of behavior. And if we don't make a new decision, we will stay in the same place. So we need to make new decisions. We need to think about where we are, think about what got us here, and then try to figure out what kinds of choices we can make from this day forward that will land us at a better destination than we were at in the past. So we are confronted with tremendous opportunity, but opportunity needs to be seized. It is not simply something which is thrust upon us. We need to seize that opportunity, to take advantage of it. And hopefully, and I think that critical realism is one of the basic ways in which we can do that, that we can reach that stage in which we literally figure out some way to avoid killing ourselves, killing our planet, and in the end, perhaps leaving no trace whatsoever of human history. So that's basically the critical realist components of it. Again, the dialectical from Roy Bhaskar's second turn dialectical critical realism, the meta-realism part from Roy Bhaskar's fourth turn, his philosophy of meta-reality, which was a part of Roy's overall spiritual turn after Roy took his trip to India and became informed by many Hindu and Vedantic ideas and incorporated them into critical realism. And so basically after that point, critical realism went into a new, and I would say a more outstanding direction than it had previous to that. Some of the other influences on dialectical meta-realism as a theory: Maoism-Third worldism. I am a Maoist third worldist. I love Maoism-Third worldism. What does it mean to be a Maoist third worldist? First, Mao was not a Maoist third worldist. Maoism-Third worldism was developed long after Mao had died. So he was not the father of Maoism-Third worldism. But to a large extent, Maoism-Third worldism is inspired by many of the ideas, not all, but many of the ideas which were originally advanced by Mao Zedong. For example, it was Mao who came up with the idea of a peasant revolution. Marx and Engels never talked about that. They talked about a proletarian revolution. A peasant revolution, I think, is somewhat analogous to Antonio Gramsci's use of the term the subaltern, the other, the marginalized, the forgotten peoples of the world. And in Mao's China, they are the ones who rose up and struggled to create the People's Republic of China. The term People's Republic of China remains, although sadly, not much is left of Mao's work. If anything, modern China, mainland China, is basically a kind of authoritarian capitalism. There is no real element of what I would call revolutionary socialism or communism in mainland China. And I honestly wish that the leaders of mainland China, out of respect to Mao Zedong, would leave the term People's Republic of China alone. Just leave it alone and recognize that you are the ones who abandoned it. No one forced you to do so. You did it of your own free will. You chose to abandon it. You chose to move away from the work of Chairman Mao. And so I hope that that happens. I really do hope that, because I really don't think that mainland China is a very good testimony to the work of Mao Zedong. I sometimes call Maoism-Third worldism socialism from below, third worldism, fourth worldism. Why do I do that? First, socialism from below has been used by a variety of scholars with different intents. In my case, what I primarily am talking about is a socialism below the first world, in power, in prestige, in privilege, in wealth. In other words, the third or developing world and the fourth or indigenous world. And it is those parts of the world which I think can ultimately be the source of our transformation. So we can combine that with Roy Bhaskar's critical realism. We can say, well, what kind of transformation are we looking for, or how can we get to that transformation? I think that Maoism, Third worldism shows us that way. It is made very evident in Maoism-Third worldism, or socialism from below, third worldism, fourth worldism, that the first world has failed. The first world is a world of imperialism. It is a world which dominates the capitalist world system. And until the first world is gone in its present form, and the capitalist world system has entirely deteriorated, there is no way, in my opinion, that the third and fourth world can really build a sustainable form of revolutionary socialism or communism. So that's what I mean when I talk about Maoism third worldism. Next, intersectional Marxism. The most prolific scholar in this area is a person by the name of Ashley Bowler. She has taken the work of Kimberly Collins, Patricia Hill Collins and others, and formulated them in an entirely different direction, meaning Patricia Hill Collins was a progressive, is a progressive. She is not a Marxist. I met her once. I served on a panel with her. I never had an extended conversation with her. I briefly introduced myself to her. At that time, Collins was not very well known. Her intersectionality had not yet become very common. I, however, was already using her book, and that's what I told her. For some reason, she did not seem to be overly impressed when I told her that, but I was already using her book, which was an intersectionality book. And so I thought that she would like to hear that, but I was disappointed. In any event, intersectionality, as it was developed by Patricia Hill Collins and others, was basically a progressive perspective, because it did not look at the substructure of what race, class, and gender should be. That substructure, in my view, can be called either intersectionality, the capitalist world system, or simply the class system. Any of those terms will do. And so in place of Kimberly Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins' term class, I would use the term personal class. And I do that to distinguish it from class in the class system. I have a personal class. There is a part of the map of intersectionality where my social class, where my particular social class belongs. And it is maybe a part that belongs uniquely to me, although perhaps myself and others with similar personal social classes might have some things in common, and perhaps we can work together in terms of certain political objectives. But I want to emphasize the importance of using the term personal class and abandoning the term class. So again, race, personal class, and gender. That to me is the foundation for intersectional Marxism. Now, we move on to kyriarchy. Kyriarchy is a further expansion of intersectionality. So in intersectionality, we have the thoroughfares of race, personal class, gender, and some others, disability, for example. But we don't have any thoroughfares or highways which are explicitly Marxist. And that is what kyriarchy adds. Because in kyriarchy, the thoroughfares it talks about primarily are things like imperialism, colonialism, and cultural hegemony, a term coined by the brilliant Marxist-Leninist scholar Antonio Gramsci. And so when you look at those together, intersectional Marxism and kyriarchy, you can have a much better perspective on what are these highways and what are these thoroughfares than you can by looking only at intersectionality or even intersectional Marxism on its own. Finally, praxes. The praxes of dialectical metarealism are just as important as the theory. That is a basic view in sociology, in my field, that theory and praxis need to work hand in hand. Especially Marxist sociologists would insist on that from morning till noon and from noon till sunset. That is a basic emphasis of all the work that we do. To us, you can't have a legitimate theory without a legitimate praxis. And you can't have a legitimate praxis without a legitimate theory. They need to work hand in hand. Praxis is a form of the same word practice, except in the case of praxis, we refer to a more specific idea, namely a practice that is used in collaboration with a theory. That is what distinguishes generally the word praxis from praxis, from practice rather. Now, there are two basic praxes in dialectical metarealism. One is conscientization. The other is Antifa, sometimes horribly mispronounced as Antifa, which doesn't tell you anything. What is Antifa an abbreviation for? Nothing. But Antifa is an acronym, an abbreviation for anti-fascism. Yes. So Antifa is an important praxis in dialectical metarealism. For me, what I do primarily with Antifa is I focus on the corruption which exists in the Rio Grande Valley, both on the US and the Mexican side. And there is massive corruption in the Rio Grande Valley. There are people who literally have sold their hearts and souls to the drug cartels. Many law enforcement officials on both sides of the border, many military people in Mexico, the Border Patrol in the United States, many Border Patrol agents are sold out to the drug cartels. Every month, there is a new list of people, sometimes judges, sometimes law enforcement officers, sometimes mayors, who have been charged or convicted of a crime connected with collaboration with the drug cartels. Why are they doing it? The money. The cartels are willing to pay out enormous sums of money. That is especially successful in Mexico, where there is so much poverty. But even in the United States, the amount of money that the cartels are willing to pay Americans is so high that it can be difficult to refuse. And as a result, some, I would say, less than ethical individuals have accepted that money in return for basically looking the other way. So what do we see here in the Rio Grande Valley? Well, right near me, there are mansions that are owned by cartel members, and they are known cartel members. It is very easy to identify cartel members, and there's no point in my telling you how. Just take my word for it. It is very easy to identify them by how they dress and by how they groom themselves. We see them all the time in stores. I see them in Walmart. I see them in Target. They are all over the place. They do not pose a danger or much of a danger to Americans. They do pose a danger to Mexicans. In Mexico, they can chop your head off. They can seize your house and kick you out into the streets. They can blow up your car. They are a real menace. They have destroyed Mexico. In effect, the cartels own Mexico. And that is not an overstatement. They own Mexico. Do they own the Rio Grande Valley in the US? Not quite, but it's going in that direction. And if we are not careful, if we do not watch out enough, that may happen at some point in the not too distant future. So when I'm talking about Antifa, I'm referring to a number of things, but primarily I am referring to first the basic idea of the fighting the drug cartels, and second, just generally defending the rights of the poor and the oppressed against the massive corruption which exists here in the Rio Grande Valley. So when I call myself Antifa, that is basically what I mean here. When I came down here, I was looking to find a way to apply Antifa here, and it was very, very easy. And I'm not happy about that. I wish it would have been more difficult. But the corruption is so great here, so great. You call a physician's office, they don't answer the phone. You call an auto mechanic, they don't answer the phone. You call almost any store, and they don't answer the phone. Imagine living in a place like this. Well, that is where I live, and I deal with that. And I wonder what's going to happen when I get much older, if I get much older, and I need to call for something, and I can't just get into my car and drive to a store. Well, I am going to be in trouble. But do they care? No. They built a massive structure, an FBI building right next door here to Mission in McAllen, to investigate the Medicare corruption, fraud here, and other types of crimes that are committed. Many people call it the spillover effect from the cartels in Mexico. They use that to explain the reason why there is so much corruption on the American side. Whatever the reason, the corruption does exist. I know people, mostly poor people, who are victimized by it. Many have no idea how to stand up to them, what to do. And so I try to be their voice. That is Antifa to me. That is Antifa to me. To be the voice of the people who are basically the unheard, the subaltern, the marginalized people in society. And so Antifa needs to be providing voice to people here in this part of the United States and across the border in Mexico as well. Finally, in terms of praxes, conscientization. Conscientization, which I've discussed many times, critical conscience and consciousness raising, is also an important praxis in dialectical metarealism, because it is through conscientization that I attempt to communicate my own ideas with the outside world, and especially with the people in the world, in this part of the world, who are poor, who are dispossessed, who basically have nowhere else to turn. And so to me, conscientization is an important liberatory, emancipatory praxis for me, living where I live. It is vital to me. It is vital to me that I practice that here in the Rio Grande Valley. Maybe other people are doing it too. I hope so, but I have yet to meet someone. If you are out there, if you are doing something even remotely similar to what I am doing here in the Rio Grande Valley, please let me know. Please let me know in the comments section. I want to talk with you. I want to find out what you are doing and possibly collaborate with you, because two is more effective than one in general. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.